Welcome to another episode of Auto Mundial, the weekly car news and review show where this week we're taking a look at a range of new releases. We have two chic super minis from France, the new Renault Clio and Peugeot 208, as well as the latest version of the popular Nissan Juke. All that is still to come. First though,
the Geneva Motorshow may have been cancelled this year, but that didn't stop the tradition of hosting the Car of the Year awards from the event venue. 60 journalists from 23 European countries gathered to drive the 7 nominated cars and award points to each. The finalists this year consisted of everything from super minis to supercars, with the usual array of European hatchbacks, as well as a Tesla and the Porsche Taycan. Last year's winner, the Jaguar I-Pace, proved that electric cars are finally good enough to win, but the car of the year 2020 is the Peugeot 208. Surging to first place in the scores, the judges were impressed by the 208's diverse powertrains. As well as the traditional petrol and diesel options, the new Peugeot Super Mini is available as an EV, and you can find out more about it later in the show.
A decade or two ago, the French ruled the Super Mini class. Cars like the Peugeot 206 and Renault Clio sold in their millions, while Citroën Saxo helped to resurge the hot hatch market. In more recent years, however, the Ford Fiesta and Volkswagen Polo have been taking class honours. So now, how have the French brands responded? Well, both Renault and Peugeot have new models out, and both have the Fiesta firmly in their sights. This is the latest iteration of the Clio, a name which has been a European bestseller since its inception 30 years ago. The previous model entered production in 2012 and is one of the only cars we can think of that actually increased its annual sales every year. Now, though, Renault has replaced it, although you might not realise at first. You have to look carefully to notice the differences, but Renault insists that this is an all-new car and not just a facelift. While styling has clearly been borrowed from the old car, this new model is in fact a bit smaller. It's shorter and lower, but Renault has somehow managed to create more space inside. The new car doesn't actually share any parts at all with the old one, and the more you look at it, the more obvious the differences become. For starters, there are C-shaped LED headlights like you get on a Megane. Then you notice the cleaner lines, sharper bumpers and bigger alloy wheels. It is a smart-looking car, but the Clio always has been. In the past, though, the chic little Clio was always let down by a drab, cheap, plasticky interior. Thankfully, though, this new one is greatly improved. It's well equipped and just as well trimmed as any of its rivals. For now, the Clio gets a range of conventional petrol and diesel engines, starting with a 75 brake horsepower 1-litre petrol motor and topping out with a 129 bhp 1.3. The entry-level motor is fine around town, but noticeably underpowered on a motorway. For longer journeys, the diesels are a better bet, but it's the top-spec 1.3 that offers the best blend of economy and performance. There are no plans for an electric version, with Renault simply stating that customers after an electric Super Mini can get a Zoe, but hybrid versions are in the pipeline.
but if you do want a French electric Super Mini that isn't a Zoe, Peugeot has you covered with this, the all-new 208. Available as an EV or with a selection of combustion engines, the 208 is by far the boldest Super Mini on sale. It joins the 508 and an array of SUVs in the brand's lineup with some truly unique styling. In fact, the 208 looks so cool, it's hard to believe it shares its platform with the new Corsa. At the front, the chrome grille and piercing headlights are some of our favourite design features. There's a 208 badge above the grille, a tribute to the classic 504, and of course the iconic lion. Meanwhile, at the rear, the angular C-pillar shape harks back to the 205, the original Peugeot Super Mini. while the taillights are designed to look like a claw. Step inside and Peugeot interiors just seem to get better and better. From the 508, Peugeot has turned it up a notch further, with high-quality plastic and leather finishes. The stitching in the door panels and around the seats are particularly well put together, giving the whole car an almost German feel. We're still not sure about the small and strangely positioned steering wheel, but overall it's fabulous. The new 208 is available with a 1.2-litre 3-cylinder or a 1.5-litre diesel. But it's the electric E208 which came as the biggest surprise. The EV looks exactly the same as the regular car, only the little E badges give you any indication that it's any different. The E208 has a range of over 200 miles and can charge to 80% within half an hour.
Both of these cars have put the French manufacturers back to the top of the Super Mini class. They're stylish, well-built and better equipped than ever, and are finally proper alternatives to Fiestas and Polos.
Believe it or not, it's been 10 years since we first saw the Nissan Juke at the Geneva Motorshow, and it caused quite a stir with styling unlike nothing else and a striking resemblance to 2009's Qazana concept. One of the very first crossovers that helped to popularise the genre, it seemed like the old Juke would never go away. Finally, no, the new one is here and it still looks just as weird as ever. A clear evolution of the old model, the new Juke continues the love it or hate it styling with a strange front end and a chunkier rear end. It certainly looks more modern, although we're still not quite sold on the weird headlight arrangement. It seems like we're in the minority though, as the previous Juke was a huge sales success for Nissan, despite its even more peculiar face. But despite its initial popularity, the market for crossover SUVs has grown exponentially since the launch of the original a decade ago. Perhaps that's why Nissan has taken its time with this one to make sure it can compete with the flurry of new competition. In profile, the new Juke actually looks pretty good, with bold exaggerated wheel arches and tapering roofline, giving it a sporty look. It's wider and longer than the old car, with 105mm being added to the wheelbase. Despite that though, the new model is 35 kilos lighter thanks to its Renault Captur platform and high-tension steel construction. Built at the firm's Sunderland factory in the northeast, the only engine offered from launch is a 1-litre turbocharged 3-cylinder petrol from the Micra, with either a 6-speed manual gearbox or an all-new 7-speed dual-clutch automatic, replacing the old CVT transmission. For now, power stands at 115 brake horsepower, which is enough to see the Juke from 0 to 62 in 10.4 seconds for the manual and just over 11 seconds for the auto, with both cars maxing out at just 112 miles per hour. It's likely though that a hybrid will join the lineup at some point, and maybe even an electric version. Thanks to the extended wheelbase, there's now more interior space than before, both for knee and headroom, which is especially apparent in the back. Nissan has worked on the driving position too, making it feel more like a car than an SUV. The interior has had a total overhaul, with none of the old Juke's quirky bits making their way over to the new car. The cabin is still funky though, and really sporty, with flashes of red and gloss black trim. It's bang up to date and features a bright 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system. Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are included, along with a useful Wi-Fi hotspot. Sadly though, once out on the road, the Juke's little engine doesn't quite feel up to the job, while the ride leaves plenty to be desired.
But for fans of funky crossovers, there are plenty of other options. The Jeep Renegade, for example, gets some great chunky looks and some genuine off-road capability, something almost unheard of in this segment. It gets a greater range of engines too, all of which are more powerful than the Juke's Micra engine. On the road though, it feels a bit agricultural as it rolls through corners with very little feel through the wheel. The Jeep's sister car, the Fiat 500X. This is by far the most stylish car in this class. with gorgeous bits of chrome trim inside and out and some wonderful retro styling. It's much better suited to road driving than the Jeep too, despite their shared platform.
As ever, we'd recommend saving some cash and getting a regular hatchback instead, but if you do have your heart set on a crossover, make sure you shop around. The Duke's quirky image may appeal to some, but there are better all-rounders out there.
After the break, the Porsche Macan GTS. Still to come, the latest performance SUV from Porsche.
It's well known that car manufacturers produce different models for specific countries, allowing them to make the most out of local laws and restrictions. Differing legislation such as emission and safety laws play a part, as well as demographical and geographical reasons. Europe's city streets are not suited to a Ford F-150, for example, in the same way that K-car would be terrifying in America. And today it's the Toyota Sequoia that has us wishing we could get our hands on some North American market cars in Europe. Launched in 2000, the Sequoia was the first vehicle from a Japanese mark in the full-sized SUV class in the States. And 2 decades later, this is the latest version. Although despite its updates for 2020, it doesn't seem to have moved on much since the previous car. It has the same engine, which is available in 2- or 4-wheel drive, and inside out the car looks much the same. However, the 4.7-litre has been dropped, so all models are now fitted with a 5.7-litre V8. This has plenty of punch, and with 381 horsepower, over 30 more than the Chevrolet Tahoe, and 6 more than the entry-level Ford Expedition. And with a starting price similar to both its American rivals, starting at a tad under $50,000, it seems like good value on paper. So if the engine and exterior is the same, what's new? Well, Toyota has been making the Sequoia a bit more off-road ready and adventurous, especially with the TRD Pro trim level. This model features new Fox shocks, skid plates and blacked out emblems, giving it much more street cred as well. However, it is $64,000, making it very much a car for enthusiasts. Having said that, the baseline SR5 model is still very capable, with Apple and Android support, adaptive cruise control and lane departure warning as standard. Optional extras include heated front seats and integrated navigation. Features and gizmos aside, The cabin of the Sequoia does show its age. Besides the 7-inch touchscreen infotainment display, complete with smartphone compatibility, the Sequoia's interior is outdated and a little dull. There's lots of hard plastics and cheap fabrics that you'd expect to find on a 90s SUV, not something from 2020. Thankfully, the cargo area is one of the largest in its class, and a flexible seating arrangement allows for up to 8 passengers. Furthermore, because of its improved off-road capabilities, the Sequoia rides bumps very well, and its towing ability is also a class frontrunner. Where the Sequoia majorly falls down is with its fuel economy. The combined figure is quoted at 15 miles per gallon, which is poor even for the large SUV class. For a daily driver, this will put off a lot of buyers. For these reasons, we're still waiting for the upgrade that the Sequoia needs to leap to the top of the larger SUV table. However, Toyota has recognised this, and in 2022, the brand has promised that the Sequoia will be overhauled to the F1 platform, which allows for hybrid variants and its latest infotainment systems. So, if the Sequoia is the kid with a retro games console, which of the new gen, the Ford Expedition and Chevrolet Tahoe, is the best pick?
Well, both have been recently redesigned and upgraded, so there is plenty to shout about. On the power front, the Tahoe packs a bigger punch thanks to a pair of available V8s, opposed to the V6 in the Ford. The smaller one feels a little weak, but opt for the full fat 6.2 and you'll soon see the Ford disappear to nothing in the rear-view mirror. It is also a bit cheaper, and inside, the space and number of gadgets available is seriously impressive. The options list seems to go on like the receipt for a weekly shop, with wonderful things like Bose audio and big screens for the rear seats. The Expedition has the Tahoe one-upped in towing though, something that's very important in the States. It can tow well over 4 tons, more than any of its rivals, and yet Ford still claims a respectable 24 combined mpg. Inside, the big Ford has leather everywhere, but it is let down by acres of nasty, cheap-feeling plastics. It looks good though, with a big square dashboard matching the exterior styling. But the Chevy is the winner on this occasion. It has tons of storage and really is the most practical car in its class. Since the success of the original Porsche Cayenne in the early 2000s, we are becoming increasingly aware of SUVs blurring the boundaries between utility vehicle and sports car. And while Porsche may have started the trend, countless premium manufacturers are cashing in. But new for 2020, Porsche is returning fire with this, the Macan GTS. Sitting in between the Macan S and the Turbo, the GTS offers something a little different to either of them. It may not be as powerful as the flagship Turbo model, but with lower suspension and an all-round more aggressive chassis setup, it is the most driver-focused. It comes as standard with Porsche's active suspension management system, which responds to road conditions and sets up the car differently depending on your selected driving mode. Under the bonnet lies the same 2.9-litre twin-turbo V6 you find in the Turbo, this time down-tuned to 375 brake horsepower, an increase of 15 from its predecessor. 0 to 62 miles per hour takes just 4.7, while top speed is 162. Not bad for a 2-ton SUV. Better yet, it'll get from 0 to 100 in under 12 seconds. It still uses the familiar 7-speed PDK gearbox, but this time it's being tuned to deliver faster shifts in Sport Plus mode and smoother ones in normal. You may be thinking though, what's the point of lowering an SUV and aiming it at keen drivers? And on the face of it, it does seem a little silly. However, sporty Macans have always felt like chunky hot hatchbacks, thanks to their relatively small size and Porsche's sorcery when it comes to making big 4x4s handle like sports cars. To distinguish the GTS from lesser versions, it gets some bespoke styling details. The front features are characterised by black painted elements, while the red brake calipers complete the sporty look. It's also available with 20-inch alloys, with the same design as those on a 718 Spider. The interior has also been given some attention. Loads of Alcantara and more black detailing. All these extra bits coupled to the almost obnoxious exhaust make it much more of a head-turner than the somewhat more discreet turbo. As is common on Porsches, it gets the aesthetically messy but somehow satisfying rows of many buttons either side of the centre console. Not the neatest solution, but easier than sorting your way through a complicated infotainment system. Speaking of which, the system in the Macan is first class, with the crispest graphics this side of a 4K TV.
However, the Macan GTS isn't the only fast SUV in this corner of the market. This is the Audi SQ5 TDI, and it does things a little differently. As the name suggests, it uses a diesel engine rather than a petrol V6, but don't go thinking this is some glammed-up canal boat. It can hit 62 from rest in 5.1 seconds, onto its way up to an electronically limited top speed of 155. This surprising turn of speed comes courtesy of a turbocharged 3-litre V6 churning out 342 bhp and a monumental 700 Newton-meters of torque. It certainly has the S in SUV covered then, and it gets better. To back up the TDI's more frugal image, it makes use of Audi's 48-volt mild hybrid system, not something you'd usually associate with a fast 4x4. The Q5 base is also more practical than the Porsche and just as well equipped and trimmed. However, the diesel soundtrack is unlikely to win favour with many petrol heads, leaving the sharp, focused Macan as the current class favourite.
It's far from the fastest SUV on the market, with options like the Alfa Stelvio Quadrifoglio and Jaguar F-Pace SVR turning things up to 11. But for the money, nothing comes close to the compact Porsche.
Join us again next week on Auto Mundial as we take a look at a new American hypercar, the Czinger 21C, and a new EV from Kia.